Hey guys, how's it going? You've seen the first impressions video. Time for the real deal. This will be my review, discussion, whatever you want to call it, of the Cold Steel Swift 2. I think I mentioned way back when I did my most anticipated of 2015 video. Now it's almost 2016, but one of the things I was really looking forward to was this assisted opening knife from Cold Steel. And finally it came out and I was able to get my hands on one. So really excited to do that. And I've been very happy, okay? Now, what I like about this is I like the general change from the typical Cold Steel to flat slabs of G10. I love just the curvature, the blade shape. It's a very attractive knife as far as I'm concerned. And I think that's more important than we sometimes mention, okay? The way a knife looks is really key because there are tons of knives out there, okay? And so if one is just ugly to you, you're not going to buy it, all right? And so the look on a knife is going to be important. And this one, I think, is a really cool departure for Cold Steel. I think they've done a great job on just the overall aesthetics, the feel in hand, the way it looks, the flow of the design, all right? I went with, of course, the DLC coated version, but other than that, this is everything that I'll say will apply to either version. And I will make some comments on the DLC because I have been very pleased with that change from Cold Steel. That's a really needed change for them. So let's go ahead and get started with the size and weight on this. It's one of the many things to like about this knife. This is a fairly big knife, and you guys know I'm into bigger stuff. I like the size of this at 8 5/8 inches overall. Really nice size, okay? I really find this fills my hand. I feel like I've got lots of blade to work with. Just really like the overall size on this. And for that size, it's not overly heavy. 4.6 ounces is not that bad at all, okay? So 4.6 ounces, 8 5/8 inches. That comes out to be a 3 5/8 inch blade and a 5-inch handle. Now, I think the marketing says a 4-inch blade, and I guess if you measure from here, see where the blade leaves the handle down here, you will get 4 inches. But I'm pretty sure that legally, and practically anywhere that cares about blade length, Canada, there's no blade length requirements, but for anywhere that cares in terms of the law, they're going to measure from the top of the handle to the tip, or maybe they'll measure cutting edge, I don't know, but the only way you get 4 inches is if you measure from down here, so that's a bit strange. Anyway, very good knife. It does have a little bit of, notice how there's a lot of blade showing when it's closed. I thought I'd comment on this. This sort of reminds me of a lot of Spyderco knives. Spyderco, they often, the width in this dimension is often quite thick, and so this is one of the few Cold Steel knives that kind of has that thicker, more blade showing than what we sometimes see, or what we maybe even often see. I do have some comparisons here for you before we get into the rest of the video, so let's go ahead and check those out. I've got a couple of assisted knives, a couple of other Cold Steels that probably compete pretty closely with this one, and some that don't really compete but are just popular assisted openers. So there's and one of the things I want to comment on is one of the cool features about this, okay? So there's the Sog Aegis, and you can see that the Swift is considerably larger, but the point I want to make about this is that if you're interested in the Aegis, you can see you might be interested in the Swift as well. The Swift is giving you a much stronger lock, okay, and a much more sturdy construction. So where I would call this more of an EDC knife, I wouldn't call it hard use, I wouldn't call it combat. This is a great EDC, but also if I was in the bush, if I was a police officer, a soldier in a combat situation, if I was a firefighter in an emergency situation, I would feel totally comfortable with this, not so much with this, okay? One other popular assisted knife is the Blur, and again, it's much bigger, and again, it's much stronger. So if you're into assisted knives, but you've noticed, as I have, that a lot of the assisted knives out there are built more for speed than they are for strength, this is a great marriage of speed and strength. It gives you that super fast deployment of an assist, while at the same time offering the strength that comes from a triad lock. So that's a win. Now, a knife that probably is closer to the same level of quality, the same level of strength would be the Benchmade Barrage. You can see the Swift is still a little bit bigger, although not much. The blade steel on this is S30V. Now, not all Barrages come with that. I had to select the S30V steel. The Cts Xhp is good steel, and is it better than S30V? I kind of think it's marginally better, but to be honest, the reality is for probably 99% of users, myself included, when you get to that, any good quality steel is going to be similar. But the one thing I will say about the Barrage, and I've said this about Benchmade before, their assist is smooth and clean. It's really, really impressive. Okay, the Swift is still fast, but it's just not quite as polished. Okay, it just feels a little less refined than the Benchmade. Finally, let's get down to cold steel. If you're interested in a triad lock and cold steel knives, are there some things you probably want to look at compared to this? Sure. How about the Recon 1? Recon 1 is a great knife. It is larger than the Swift by a fair margin, so you're dealing with a fairly big knife here, and an extremely well-built knife. This is a great blade, guys. I really, really like the Recon 1, and would highly recommend this to anyone who's looking for, a hard use, combat ready, bushcraft ready blade. Recon 1 is a great option. Another great option, one of my favorites, this may be my all-time favorite cold steel, is the Code 4. This is just a great blade. It's super slim in pocket. It carries super, super well. Closer in size to the Swift. And these are really, really comparable, guys. I like both of them almost exactly the same because, yeah, anyway. But if you've got a Code 4, or if you're familiar with the Code 4, that's how it works out in terms of size. A lot of similar dimensions on that. Okay, so those are some comparisons for you, both comparisons in terms of competition as well as comparisons in terms of size and role and function. So those are some other blades you may either have or want to look at if you're looking at one of these, or some of those, maybe if you're looking at one of these, maybe you're thinking of buying a Barrage or a Blur, you may want to look at the Swift as well, because there are some advantages to a triad lock over literally any other folding knife lock. Like the triad lock is going to be the strongest. So if you're in that situation where you're really concerned about lockup, the triad lock is going to be the way to go for you. Having said that, I want to add and remind you that that's not the only consideration of a folding knife, okay? So, there you go, guys. Those are some comparisons. Let's go ahead and talk about the blade. And I guess we'll zoom in on this so that you guys can take a close look at what we're dealing with here. Let me move off to the side a little bit and zoom you in on this blade. Okay, so there you go. Get that to focus a little bit. All right, so there you are with a close-up version of the Cold Steel Swift. You can see, hopefully at this level, you can see the DLC coating and see how it still reflects light. It's really, really cool. When you put a DLC coating on, a polished finish of steel that's finished, with a polish, like a satin finish basically, you end up still being able to see the grind lines, and you can see the steel. It still shines a little bit. It's just gorgeous. I really, really like that feature, and I've had other knives like that as well, such as the Spedico Zabo. Really, really cool looking feature, and I kind of prefer this over the more matte finish like what you get on the Aegis. See how it's like a matte finish? It barely reflects any light. This doesn't reflect a lot, but you can still get a sense for the steel through this finish, which I really like. I'm going to call this like a modified spear point. Really, really neat blade design. It's just a little bit different. What I like about it is it looks a little different, and it feels different in hand. You sort of feel like it's almost like a Wharncliffe feel in the way it relates to your fingers, but it functions just like any normal, spear point or drop point blade. So you're getting great functionality, great versatility, while still achieving, a slightly different, more interesting look, which I think is cool. It is a flat ground blade, and that does, I would kind of prefer this to be a hollow grind. I think, one, it would look really awesome with the black DLC and a hollow grind, but I also like hollow grinds better for EDC blades. Anyway, not the end of the world. This still cuts really, really well, okay? And here's one thing that I should point out, and cold steel generally does a good job of this. They usually do a great job of combining slicing power with strength. So this slices really, really well, and I've used this for a lot of food prep and a lot of cardboard cutting and a lot of stuff where slicing really matters, and it functions really, really well. But at the same time, if you turn the blade sideways, you can see how much that blade keeps a lot of material all the way out to the tip, which makes this knife stronger. Okay, so really, really good win. They've done a great job balancing cutting ability with strength, which is always a hard balance to strike. Now, this is Cts Xhp Steel, and I'm going to say this. I've had a few blades with this steel, a couple of Spydercos, and I think cold steel, the Cts Xhp from Cold Steel, although it's good and it's definitely high quality steel, it's a little softer than Spyderco's Cts Xhp, okay? Still good quality, it still holds an edge really well, it still takes an edge really well, but it's just a teeny bit softer, which makes it a bit easier to sharpen, and it does, you know, it's gonna dull on you just a little bit faster than, you know, say, I think one of the Domino versions is in Cts Xhp, there's a few others. So just kind of keep that in the back of your mind, okay? Now, carrying on, by the way, don't take that the wrong way. It's still a great, great steel, and I really like Cts Xhp, and I think it's an awesome change that Cold Steel's made. I just don't feel, and this is purely subjective, okay? This is just the way my sense for it. It's not quite as hardened. It's not taken to quite the same level of hardness as other knives you may own in this steel. All right, let's now talk about lockup and deployment. First, to simply comment on the triad lock, it's stupidly strong, okay? Just pretty much beyond argument at this point that the triad lock is the strongest lock you can get in a folding knife, okay? So there you go, that covers that. Now, the question becomes, is it, you know, people talk about the difficulty and the toughness of the triad lock, okay? I will say it is smoother. If you, let me demonstrate here. So I can flick this knife open pretty well, which I think is a change compared to some of my other cold steels. I can't really flick this knife open at all. So it feels like for 2015 they have stepped up their game in terms of fit and finish and smoothness, and certainly if you want, you see that not a lot of cold steels will drop freely like that. So it's pretty cool that this one will, okay? It indicates a high level of quality, high level of attention to detail and fit and finish there. So that definitely is a win. Now, so lockup is strong. The movement is quite smooth. Let's talk about the assist, because the assist is very firm and very fast, but notice, as you probably saw a second ago, there's no spring pressure through all of this range of motion, okay? It's not till you get to right here. Now I'm engaging the spring bar, which is right in here, and I'm going to bend that spring bar back into place until the knife closes, okay? The detent is fairly strong on this, so I like to, by the way, do sort of a middle finger open with a lot of my assisted knives. Works well on this one as well, but there is a fair bit of detent to overcome, okay? And once you do overcome that detent, that spring does kick in really, really hard, okay? So it's a good solid deployment. It actually does even have some sort of recoil to it. You can feel the knife jump in your hand when that blade deploys. Okay, so that's the spring deployment. Now, let me talk about the way this functions, because it works differently than a lot of other blades that you've used. It doesn't have a torsion bar like a Kershaw. It doesn't have a coil spring like a Barrage or a Sog, or like a Benchmade or a Sog. It has inside here this sort of large U-shaped spring that's turned on the flat. So it's not a spring like this, the way you're used to seeing with a Kershaw torsion bar, let's say, or even with your other cold steels with the lock bar spring. It's a piece of flattened steel this way, it's turned this way. And you've got this U-shape, okay? And what you're doing when you close the blade, it pushes the bottom up and then that bottom stays just behind the little tab on the blade. So that when you push, you change the geometry here just a little bit. When you push to start opening the blade, this kicks in and fires the blade out, okay? So then this ends up as an open U, and when you close the knife, once again, you're closing it. I'll roll in some pictures right here of how that works, okay? So just bear with me a second, and a couple of pictures will scroll by. And now you can see that the top of that U becomes the lock bar spring, okay? Now I do want to comment on this. There have been a couple of guys that have said the lock bar spring actually broke. Now, and if you look at the pictures, if you remember what they looked like, maybe even go back and see them again, you can see there that the lock bar spring at the top is a thinner piece of steel than the large blade spring at the bottom, okay? And that's going to be kind of important to notice. You'll have to excuse my cold there, guys, because that could explain what's happening where a couple guys have had issues. Now, the way this works is one of the scales is actually milled out to allow for, I'll see if I can show you on camera. I'm trying to find a little bit of light reflecting there. In this side, if you can look down here, there is the spring. And it's kind of a U-shaped spring that's milled into this scale that allows the functionality of the knife. Both the blade spring and the lock bar spring are all one piece, and there's a couple screws back here in the handle that hold it in place. Now, one of the things that means that if you try to de-assist this knife, you will permanently de-assist it, okay? You would actually have to cut that spring off in order to de-assist this knife, which means now you're never re-assisting it without getting a new spring from cold steel. So I'm sure this would be a great knife de-assisted. I haven't commented on that yet, but I will later. But if you do that, it's permanent, okay? So that's my overall discussion on lockup and deployment. Very, very fast, very hard spring tension, and it locks up really solid. Now, I will say a couple of days that I've had this, I had a little bit of up and down blade play. That's fairly common in the triad lock, okay? So it'll develop blade play, and then that blade play will go away as the lock tooth kind of interfaces better with the back of the blade tang and the pin that's in here, okay? So it did get some blade play, and if you do have a cold steel knife that gets blade play, just open it and close it a few times, and a lot of times it'll go away right away, okay? Other times it may take a day or two just for the pieces of steel to kind of wear together, and then again it'll go away. I've never had a cold steel develop blade play and keep it, okay? I've never had it not go away. So generally speaking, that'll be the case. Now, I did point out a couple people had the lock bar spring break. If that happens, right now it's only a couple that I know of. If it becomes an issue, I guess cold steel will have to redesign this a little bit. But if yours does, like, I don't think that's a big issue, and I'm not at all worried about it happening on my knife. And if it did, Cold Steel does have very, very good customer service. They would replace the knife for you right away, okay? So it wouldn't be a big problem. Finally, let's go and talk about the handle. This handle is 3D machined G10. I really, really like it. It has sort of a micro texturing on it, so it's, even though it's not that heavy brick pattern like on the Recon 1 here, it is actually well textured. It really, really grips your hand. And of course, that's something important in a knife that's this kind of knife, okay? This is certainly designed around being potentially a defensive tool, okay, for a cop or a soldier. In addition to, you know, obviously it's a great utility knife, and it's very strong and very fast, and any emergency situation, or even any, you know, just cutting chore, it's going to be really handy. But how well the knife grips into the hand is going to be really important in a lot of different, you know, if you're in the rain and you need to cut something, if you are, of course, defending your life, or if you're, you know, in an emergency situation and you've got to get this out and make a cut to a seat belt or something, and you got to be able to hold on to it. And they've done a really good job of that. The pocket clip, sorry, I almost just lost that word, pocket clip. The pocket clip is very good and does not interfere with grip in any way, okay? It is movable to left side or right side, but it's only tip-up carry, which is fine by me because that's the only way I'm interested in carrying my knife anyway. Comfort is excellent. The ergos on this are phenomenal. Now the one drawback I will say, or the one complaint I do have, is that the jimping that's on here does nothing. Okay, it's really just aesthetic. Okay, I get no grip whatsoever from this jimping. My finger just slides over it almost as easily as it slides over, just the flat steel of the side of the blade. So if they did a second gen Swift 2, it would be nice to see sharper edges on that jimping so it really grips your hand well. But otherwise, that's about everything else on the handle is good. I will say there is one thing. There's enough space here, although you'd have to be careful that if you're doing a finer cutting task, you actually can choke up on the knife. But I wouldn't do this in any kind of stress. But if you're stripping a wire or you're doing some really fine task, there is enough room here to get a finger up there and use that secondary or that thumb cutout at the top of the blade. With the standard grip, it's kind of too far up. I don't find it very useful. Okay, this is where I land with the standard grip, and this is how I use the knife probably 99% of the time. All right, now I think we have covered everything except, oh yes, I do have one more complaint. The pocket clip is fine. It comes in and out of pocket much better, and this smoother G10 I will say is a big improvement for cold steel. But if I turn this way, see how this pocket clip has the bend here to pinch your pant leg, but then when it comes up, instead of just going like this, it actually goes like this. So it actually tips down, which can create a bit of an issue. And I've considered actually bending it back up. I haven't done that yet, but I may do that just because it would make it a little easier to get in and out of pocket. And there are a number of cold steels that do that, and it always kind of annoys me. Anyway, there you go, guys. That's the ergos. So, come on. Back up. All right, there we go. So overall, my impressions on this are really, really good. I think this is a real step of progress for cold steel. The quality on this, the ergonomics on this, the 3D G10, the blade steel, the blade shape, everything is just really, really well done on this knife. There were those couple of issues that I mentioned, and if I hear anything further, okay, maybe like 50% of the lock springs have broken, I'll update this video with that information, but I don't think that's going to be the case. So overall, great blade. Highly recommend this for an EDC. Highly recommend this for as some kind of a defensive survival tool, in a bug out bag or to carry on your person all the time for defensive purposes. Yep, I think it would do really, really well in any of those roles. And for me, what I really like about it is just its general utility. Okay, it's a great EDC knife because in addition to all those regular everyday cutting tasks, it can go above and beyond and really put you in a situation where you've got a tool that can handle just about anything that's going to come at you. Okay, so highly recommended. Very, very cool blade. I'm just really impressed with this one. Hope you enjoyed the video, and we will talk to you soon.